Hello and welcome to the Flix Forum podcast, where each episode we go back and we look at a Netflix original film in the order of release. Happy New Year's Eve! This is our 7th day of our 12 Days of Christmas special, where we're putting out an episode every day during this festive season. So today we have Netflix 352nd film from 2021. It's the French action thriller called Sentinelle, or Sentinelle. It's directed by Julien Leclercq and stars Olga Kurylenko, Marilyn, Lima, and Michel Nabokoff. I am Jesse, and I am your host. As always, thank you for joining me for this episode. As always, if you haven't seen this one, give us a pause and come back a little bit later on, because we will spoil this as we go. Because we kick off the show with the Fast Flicks, where we do a quick little summary of what the film is all about. So this one, it's about a soldier who returns from war, traumatized and seeking revenge for those who do her family wrong. This is an international film, and I do say this quite often. It's very hard often to find anything out about international films. This one is sort of similar. There's not much to say. This is probably going to be a very short episode because it does have a very short runtime as well. But let's talk about this film. So the translations for this one around the world. So in Greek and Turkish, it's called The Guard, and that ties in with what the Sentinelle is. It's a French guard service almost. In Hungarian, it's called the French Guard. That makes sense too. In Danish, it's called the French Soldier. Also makes sense. In Romanian, it's called In the Shadow of the Sentry. Ooh, adds a bit of intrigue to it. And in Russian, it's called Hourly. Not sure what that means. But anyway, this film, it was produced by Labyrinth Cinema and U Media, and it was filmed over 35 days in November and December of 2019 in Brussels in Belgium, in Nice in France, and in Casablanca in Morocco. Post-production was interrupted by the COVID-19 pandemic, though. This film does have almost like an NCIS title intro, where they give information about this program in France. So they talk about the Operation Sentinelle, which is a French arm of operation which was developed in January of 2015, and the soldiers are in charge of keeping watch to stop terrorist threats, to anticipate or foresee any attacks, and to adapt behaviours based on that as well. Their job is to intervene and to protect citizens and their territory, and the troops patrol sensitive areas in France. Apparently, 10,000 soldiers per day are currently mobilised. So that's back in 2021. So very interesting. They got 10,000 soldiers that just walk around random locations in France to protect the citizens. So very, very interesting there. This one did hit Netflix worldwide on the 5th of March 2021. What are the critics and audiences saying about this film? On Rotten Tomatoes, sits at 70%. That's on 10 reviews, so that is fresh. That's not too bad. The audience a little bit lower, sits at 49%. That's on more than 100 ratings. IMDb, it's sort of on the low side, so it's at a 4.8 out of 10 on 8,900 ratings. Letterboxd, not too many people either. 2.3 out of 5 on nearly 5,000 ratings, but it's been logged by 6,500 people. On Metacritic, there's no consensus from the critics, but the audience, there is an audience rating there on that traffic light system. It sits at a 4.5 out of 10. That's on 6 reviews, and that is red in the traffic light system. So negative, negative, negative. What are my early thoughts for this one? It's a bit of a slow burn, I guess, considering the runtime. Like, it's 80 minutes, I think, so it did feel a little bit slow. There's very little dialogue. But I guess it's fairly effective in what it's trying to do. This is literally, it turns into a revenge film. That's what it is. So if you're interested in that sort of film with a little bit of action, then you're probably going to like this. Let's talk about some characters. I'm just going to talk about 2 characters. The 2 main characters in this film, we've got Clara. Clara is our soldier. She's highly trained. She returns home to France after a traumatic event in the field in the Middle East, and she struggles with reacclimatizing to the world. She's often isolated and doesn't know how to respond to normal situations. There's like a scene where there's a backpack that's just sitting there on the bench and she's freaking out. And they do a really good job of showing her stress in that situation. When she gets back because of the trauma, she's put in this anti-terrorist unit that we spoke about before. But this isn't what she's made for. She's made for war, for conflict. And I guess because of this, she acts above and beyond what she should be doing in her new role. Like, she uses violence. She freaks out a lot. She's very trigger happy, I guess, and likes to have weapons on her too. We do get to meet her mother and her sister, and they've obviously missed her. Their father's absence sort of plays this role in that family life too. These strong females that come together. she also comes back with this dependence on painkillers and often goes to the streets to get more above and beyond what she's prescribed. So definitely struggle town. The other character I'll talk about is Clara's sister, Tanya. And we see she's so happy to have her home and wants to celebrate and spend time with her. And they go out to a club together at a night. And this is where the revenge story starts, because Clara... Clara leaves the club with a female to have a night, and leaves her sister Tanya there by herself with what appear to be Russians. And then the next moment we hear about her is that she's been beaten to a pulp and left in a coma, and this gives Clara an excuse to use her military skills to get revenge, and that's where this film goes from there. The director, Julien Leclercq, French director, obviously, 10 credits. One film that we've actually covered on this show as well a while ago. It was called Earth and Blood. And from memory, that was another film that had a very short runtime. And apparently has another Netflix film that was released in 2024 called The Wages of Fear. So Netflix are obviously going to him saying, hey, you're producing us some films that are getting some good views. We might as well, pump out a few more of these. So interesting little career so far. Let's talk about some scenes from this film. What are some scenes that stood out? What are some scenes that didn't work? Start with a good one. So I think the opening, it was a good hook. That idea that we start in the Middle East. We see Clara working as an interpreter. We know that she speaks multiple languages. She's trying to convince a woman to give up her husband and wants to protect their child. But then we see that the kid is a suicide bomber. That added some intrigue. But then obviously the play out then, that's the impact. That's the trauma that we see for Clara, and that leads into this revenge. And I guess one of the scenes that works, there's two good sort of effective action sequences. One of them is where Clara goes absolutely nuts on some men in a bathroom. Just some really good hand-to-hand combat that was filmed really well. There's a nice scene where Clara goes to... Oh, sorry, it's not really a nice scene, but it's well put together and gives some further motive, where Clara confronts this Russian kid's dad, this Russian kid that she believes is the one that attacked her sister, and she talks to the dad, and the dad's, a bit of a rough nut, and he explains that, he sent his son far away, made him leave the country so he doesn't have to account for anything, and then goes a little bit further and says, much to my disappointment, my son's never been into women, and reveals that it was him that attacked her sister. That was just gross, but it was done really well. It was a good little reveal. Tanya wakes up from her coma and sort of, says the Russian kid didn't do anything. And Clara's like, yeah, I know that. I've worked it out myself. But she talks about wanting to forget and not wanting to hold them account because she's too worried about the repercussions. I thought that was really effective. And finally, the other action sequence, Clara fights this bad guy in the hospital. Good fighting. She gets absolutely smashed, but it was still really shot quite well. So let's lead into the ones that didn't quite work. Clara... She goes exercising. She goes for a run quite a bit. I just couldn't get past how weirdly she looked when she was running. That was really off-putting. Clara, I mentioned this before. She picks up this chick at the nightclub where she loses her sister and leads to her sister's sort of disappearance and injuries. And then they go to the bedroom and they show this pretty hardcore sex. It's almost for no reason. I'm not sure why they needed to do that. I don't know. It just felt voyeuristic more than anything. Clara chases this guy at one stage who went into the sister's hospital room. She starts chasing him through the hospital and just ends up in this storage room. It just felt so random and not needed. And finally, the end. The end sort of annoyed me a little bit. We get the idea that, she's given, like, Clara's got a new passport. She said goodbye to her family. She's ready to do what she needs to do to get revenge for her sister. And we just get this flash to 3 months in the future where she goes all the way to Dubai to finally get this Russian guy and stabs him. It's very brutal with his fork. And then we see her go back to see her sister and just watches her from a distance because obviously she's wanted by the police and can no longer have a relationship with her family. So she chose revenge over spending time with her family, which I'm not sure I'm sold on that end. But that's a personal thought, obviously. Some themes, some ideas, some motifs. What's this film saying? Obviously war. War starts the film and plays an important role in this film and in Clara's personality and her development, because war has an impact on her, and it's led to these post-traumatic issues, the problems with adjusting to life after war, the addiction to painkillers, and that idea that veterans come back and they're given these menial jobs compared to what they're used to, and it makes it really hard. Revenge, I've spoken about revenge many times, but revenge and that idea of making people accountable, because sometimes those with the money in society or the wealthy, they have this diplomatic immunity at times, or the inability to break corruption, and men not having to face the consequences of their actions, and the evildoers almost being protected. The fear of victims too, like one person's word against another, and people getting away, and they're going to keep doing it if there's no consequences. So that all does tie in quite nicely as well. What did I take away from this one? I think it looked decent. Some lovely seaside locations that I think I'd really like to visit during the summer. So they picked some really good locations for this film. A question, a pondering, an idea. For me, the idea, was it easy to support Clara in her revenge? I'm not sold. I think it was more impactful, and the ability to empathize with her and the struggles mentally that she's having was probably more of a line that they could have played a bit further, rather than the idea of revenge for what happened to her sister. Yes, she might feel guilt for leaving her sister at the club, which then led to her being injured, but I think the idea that feeling like her revenge was justified is a little bit hard, because the opening is about her trauma. So the idea I would have hoped is that we'd follow through with that trauma, because at the end of the film, we don't actually see a resolution to her trauma. We see a resolution to her revenge, but we don't see whether she's now functioning and capable to live in society. So for me, that was a little bit of a frustration with the ending again, too. All right, let's wrap this up. We give the films a rating out of 5 on this show. For me, for what this is, I think it's effective and it's a decent watch. For someone to find a meaning in life, even if it isn't a legal way or a righteous way, and even if we don't actually see that they've sort of, progressed from some of the mental issues that they've had to. This film, it's a one and done. There's no need for a sequel. There's no need for a follow-up. There's no need to watch this again. It's like, cool, I watched it. It was decent. Let's move on to the next one. So for me, it's a 2.5 out of 5. Okay rating. We're on socials. We have Instagram, we have Facebook, and we have X, formerly known as Twitter. The question is, again, ties in with revenge that I wanted to put on socials. How far would you go for revenge? Are you a spiteful person that will seek revenge? I think it's a really tricky question to answer. Revenge isn't, it's often seen as a negative thing. But the idea of revenge on a sporting field, that's a completely different idea, I guess, than the revenge that Clara wants to do. So I think revenge is a tricky word. Anyway, let's move on. We're back tomorrow. Tomorrow, it's New Year's Day. Hopefully everyone gets a good sleep and we're good to go tomorrow. But we do have a nice upbeat family comedy from 2021, apparently. It's called Yes Day. And this one is directed by Miguel Arteta and stars Jennifer Garner, Edgar Ramirez, and Jenna Ortega. So big cast for that one. I'm interested. I'm intrigued. I remember when that one came out. So let's give it a watch. Get ready for tomorrow. As always, thanks for joining me. And yes, I will see you tomorrow.